He sent the message with Don Eagle to all the talent. If you go and work for Schwartz, and then you come here to my TV, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you're better off not working for Schwartz. That's the message. And Don Eagle was the guy he had to take it out on.
Before we get into pseudo wrestling, I want to ask you about Gorgeous George.
Oh yeah, we're a ways away from it yet. I blew the lid off there.
No. That's a natural progression. But Gorgeous George, I'm the biggest Gorgeous George fan in the world. I think he's probably the greatest heel of all time, at least in my opinion.
Mhm.
They said he sold more TV sets than Milton Berle. They called them Georgie sets. They sold so much. What was the progression? Now I mentioned, the amount of TVs. In 1947, 8,000 TVs. At 1950, 9% of the country had. Then by 1960, there was 90%. This massive explosion. What was the progression of George as far as television? Was most of his television, did it come out of California, or did it come out of the Dumont network?
No,
With Kohler.
Gorgeous was on Hollywood Wrestling, which Johnny Doyle and Cal Eaton were booking, and
Did Johnny Doyle, was he the one that built him up?
yeah, yeah, he's
Wow.
Gorgeous George was under contract to Johnny Doyle's booking office,
And
which
most
I'm
his
going to
fame
talk
and
about
fortune-
I'm going to talk about the booking fees here in a minute. Sorry, John, go ahead.
But his fame and fortune came out of Johnny Dole's brain and got him on TV in California. And then all of a sudden, Gorgeous George becomes this household name in the early 50s, and probably, well, the biggest star. They said he made as much as Joe DiMaggio one year, and Joe DiMaggio was the highest paid athlete in the country next to Gorgeous George.
So after Chicago, you had Los Angeles had a network broadcast called Hollywood Wrestling coming out of L.A., and then you had Dallas had Texas Wrestling coming out of Dallas, and those were the three main. And that's where Buddy Rogers got over. Buddy Rogers got over being in Texas and being on Texas Wrestling. Gorgeous George got over on Hollywood Wrestling. Vern Gagne got over on wrestling at Marigold. So you had
somebody that we're leaving out of this equation is that guy out in Washington, D.C. They had a little national TV going.
Yeah, they sure did. They came along a little bit later.
That was Vince Senior and his partners, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we'll get there, but eventually Johnny Doyle books that for a while.
Wow.
So Schwartz gets the NWA thing in Chicago, and even the fact that they even considered it made Kohler go off the edge, right? So he resigns, comes back, and they take him back. So that's kind of how that Chicago war. Now the guy sitting there watching all this is Jim Barnett, right? Mm-hmm. He's watching how all of this is happening, how these guys are doing this or whatever, and Barnett starts working with Kohler and figuring out how the booking's done and the talent management. And he eventually takes over that. Jim Barnett eventually, he's the guy that books the talent, manages the talent, recruits the talent, puts the talent under contract. He's the guy that manages the syndication from the Dumont network. And Barnett actually starts going out on the road, and because Kohler runs places outside Chicago, right? He runs Denver and a couple other places, and Barnett goes on these road trips, and he sees how the tickets are sold. He sees how the fans are treated. He sees how the newsletter gets to the thing, and he's working with the arena managers and forming these relationships. And before long, people start thinking Jim Barnett's actually the guy that's running things, right? Because Kohler's kind of a background dude. He's not somebody that's out front a whole lot. Kohler starts going to the background. Barnett starts going to the front in publicity. And so all these articles that come out about this new superstar smart guy in wrestling is all Jim Barnett.
Wow. And to get to back, I don't know if we're going backward a little bit or about the same time, to the Don Eagle screw job.
Mm-hmm.
We had Don Eagle as the semi-main event on the match with Londos and Carnera, with Jack Dempsey as the referee and 13,000 people there. That's when you have get mad and drop out of the NWA. And then they bring in Don Eagle, and that's when the screw job happens, right?
Right. That's when Kohler punishes Don Eagle for being on the opposition card.
Now, Don Eagle, a little bit of background. Don Eagle had just won the AWA title, right?
The Bowser one, yeah, the
Yeah.
one from East Coast.
And he had come in with the AWA title.
Yep.
Kohler puts him on right after all this happens with this huge card. He brings in the undercard because he's not going to bring in Londos and Carnera. So he brings in the one guy who has a chance of being the future,
Right.
brings in Don Eagle, puts him against Gorgeous George, and then what happens?
Yeah, so he does the Chicago short count. You know, the referee counts him. His shoulder's not even down on the 3 count. He
Not
gives
even
him,
close.
yeah, no, he gives him the fast count, and these guys are just wandering around the ring here for a minute. You know, like somebody just threw cold water in their face. Like they don't understand what Gorgeous George doesn't understand what happened. You know, all of a sudden he's the champion. He doesn't planning on being the champion. He doesn't want to be the champion. You know, and so they essentially gave the belt back to Eagle in the locker room. You know, and he went on about his schedule and did his next date as the champion.
And you know,
Uh, but
something funny about it, because we
but all these people that were watching television thought they saw a title change.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
and
So it's something that we talked about. 'Cause we went over the whole video of it and watched the
Yeah.
whole match and everything. It was so much fun. It was almost exactly Shawn Michaels' response in Montreal was Gorgeous George's response.
mhm.
And so you look at it, you're going, wait a minute, it looks identical, you know, and so you don't know if it's legit, not legit. You're just sitting there looking at it going, which I don't care. I love the mystique of it. And I love the
Yeah.
intrigue, but it's really interesting to see how Gorgeous George responded because you don't really know. Now, history makes it look like Gorgeous George probably wasn't in on it because he didn't do anything with the belt. He just gave it back and he didn't really, you know.
Well, I was just about to say your mental bias on Shawn Michaels is not, you can't trust it because you've heard so many stories about it that you don't really know if he's in on it or not. But I'm really dang sure looking at that video, Gorgeous George wasn't in on it. He didn't know anything. Like his response, you know, was that. And Kohler, knowing him, studying his life and character and all, he just basically worked a deal with the referee.
That's amazing. You do a screw job and you don't let any of the two performers in. If that's indeed what happened, because obviously Don Eagle wasn't in on it, but George was the one that could have been or might not have been, but it looks like he probably wasn't.
Well, what's weird about that whole match is the fact that Don Eagle, like, it disappears for a little bit. Like he's gone and his dad's in the ring, and you're like, what's going on here? And there's an obvious edit there. There's an edit. You can tell that jumps a little bit, and then all of a sudden Eagle's back in the ring. And I don't know what happened in between that, you know.
Yeah. And Don Eagle had a lot of tough times after this. I mean, his trajectory was not up. It looked like it was going up at the time, but after this screw job, I don't know if it had anything to do with that or not, but his career did not take off like they thought it would,
Yeah.
right?
No, that kind of that put a damper on it for sure. For sure did.
And so it seemed like whatever Kohler was doing was effective.
Yeah, no, he got his point
Against
across,
Schwartz.
and he was you guys said in the video, it looks like Fred Kohler's the only one that was the winner here, and I'm like, yeah, he was, and he did it for a reason. He was proving a point. Like he sent the message with Don Eagle to all the talent: if you go and work for Schwartz, and then you come here to my TV, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you're better off not working for Schwartz. That's the message. And Don Eagle was the guy he had to take it out on.